Fablehaven, Chapter 17, Part 2. The boat began to rotate quickly. "Leave me alone," Kendra demanded. "I have to get to the island." This earned a long titter from multiple voices. Kendra paddled furiously, but it did no good. She kept spinning and getting hauled in the wrong direction. The Naiad started rocking the boat again. Thanks to the low center of gravity, Kendra found that leaning was enough to prevent the boat from capsizing. But the Naiads were relentless. They tried to distract her by banging the bottom of the vessel and waving at her. The boat pitched and rocked and spun, and then suddenly the Naiads would heave in earnest, trying to catch her off balance. Time after time, Kendra reacted quickly, shifting her weight to spoil their attempts to flip her. It was a stalemate. The Naiads did not show themselves. She heard their laughter and glimpsed their hands, but never saw a face. Kendra decided to quit paddling. It was getting her nowhere and wasting energy. She resolved to exert herself only to keep the boat from tipping. The attempts grew less frequent. She said nothing, made no response to the taunting giggles, ignored the hands on the side of the boat. She simply leaned as needed when they tried to tip the boat. She was getting better at it. They were not able to tilt it as much. The attempt stopped. After about a minute of no activity, Kendra started paddling toward the island. Her progress was soon halted. She quit paddling immediately. The Naiad spun her and rocked her some more. She waited. After another minute of tranquility, she paddled again. Again, they pulled her away, but less eagerly. She sensed them giving up, getting bored. On her 8th try, using this technique, the Naiads apparently lost interest. The island grew closer, 20 yards, 10 yards. She expected them to stop her at the last moment. They didn't. The front of the paddle boat scraped against the shore. Everything remained still. The moment of truth had arrived. When she set foot on the island, either she would transform into a cloud of dandelion fluff and drift away, or she wouldn't. Almost indifferent at this point, Kendra leaped out of the boat and landed on the shore. There did not seem to be anything magical or even special about it, and she did not turn into a cloud of seeds. There was, however, a barrage of laughter from behind her. Kendra whirled in time to see her paddle boat drifting away from the island. It was already too late to do anything without jumping into the water. She slapped herself on the forehead with the heel of her hand. The Naiads had not given up. They were trying a different strategy. She had been so distracted by the prospect of becoming dandelion fluff that she had not hauled the boat out of the water as she should have. She could have at least kept hold of the rope. Well, one more favor to ask the Fairy Queen. The island was not large. It took only about 70 paces for Kendra to walk around the edge of it. Her tour of the perimeter revealed nothing interesting. The shrine was probably near the center. Although the island had no trees, it had many shrubs, many of them taller than Kendra. There were no trails, and pressing through them was irritating. What would the shrine look like? She pictured a little building, but after crisscrossing the island a few times, she realized there was no such structure. Maybe she had not turned to dandelion seeds because the island was a hoax. Or maybe the shrine was no longer here. Either way, she was stranded on a tiny island in the middle of a pond full of creatures who wanted to drown her. What would drowning feel like? Would she actually inhale water or just pass out? Or would the demon get her first? No, she had come this far. She would look again more carefully. Maybe the shrine was something natural, like a special bush or a stump. She walked around the perimeter of the island again, more slowly this time. She noticed a thin trickle of water. It was strange to find a stream, no matter how small, on such a tiny island. She followed the stream toward the center of the island until she found a place where it came bubbling out of the ground. There, at the source of the spring, was a 2-inch tall statue of a fairy, finely carved. It rested on a white pedestal that added a few more inches to the height. A small silver bowl sat in front of it. Of course, fairies were so tiny, it made sense that the shrine would be miniature as well. Kendra fell to her knees beside the spring, directly in front of the small figurine. The night was very still. Looking to the sky, Kendra noticed that the eastern horizon was turning purple. Night was coming to an end. Kendra could think to do was to pour her heart out in complete sincerity. Hello, Fairy Queen. Thank you for letting me visit you without changing me to dandelion seeds. Kendra swallowed. This felt weird. Talking to a diminutive statue? There's nothing regal about it. If you can help me, I really need it. A witch named Muriel is about to set free a demon named Bahamut. The witch has my grandpa and grandma Sorensen prisoner, along with my brother Seth and my friend Lena. If that demon gets out, it will wreck this whole preserve, and there is no way I can stop it from happening without your help. Please, I really love my family, and if I don't do something, that demon is he's going to. The reality of what she had said just hit her like a great weight and spilled out as tears. For the first time, the fact that Seth was going to die fully entered her mind. She thought of moments with him, both endearing and annoying, and realized there would be no more of either. She shook with sobs, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. She let them come. She needed the release to stop trying to suppress the horror of it all. The tears she had shed while fleeing the forgotten chapel had been of shock and terror. These were tears of realization. Tears slid down her chin and plopped into the silver bowl. Her breathing became ragged gasps between sobs. Please help me, she finally managed. An aromatic breeze drifted over the island. It smelled of rich soil and new blossoms, with just a hint of sea. Her crying began to subside. Kendra brushed the tears from her cheeks and wiped her nose on her sleeve. She sniffed, amazed at how swiftly congestion could appear. The miniature statue was wet. Had she cried on it? No. Water was seeping from its eyes, trickling down into the silver bowl. The air stirred again, still redolent with potent aromas. Kendra inexplicably sensed a presence. She was no longer alone. I accept your offering and join you in weeping. The words were not audible, but they struck her mind with such forceful impression that Kendra gasped. She had never experienced anything similar. Could fluid continue to leak from the statue into the bowl? From tears, milk, and blood, devise an elixir, and my handmaidens will attend you. The tears were obvious. All Kendra could picture was Viola for the milk. Whose blood? Her own? The cow's? The handmaidens had to be the fairies. Wait, what do I do? Kendra asked. How do I get off the island? In reply, the wind swirled for a moment and then gusted. The pleasant aromas vanished. The little statue no longer wept. The indefinable presence had departed. Kendra picked up the bowl about the size of her palm. It was nearly a third of the way full. She had hoped the Fairy Queen would resolve the situation for her. Instead, she had apparently shown her a way to resolve the problem herself. The telepathic message felt as precise as spoken words. Her family was still in danger, but the spark of hope was now aflame. How would she get off the island? Rising, Kendra walked to the shore. Unbelievably, the paddle boat was drifting in her direction. She steadily approached until reaching the island. Kendra stepped inside the boat. It pulled away from the shore spontaneously, turned around, and started toward the little white pier. Kendra said nothing. She did not paddle. She was afraid to do anything that might disrupt the effortless progress to the pier. She held the bowl in her lap, careful not to spill a drop. Then she saw it, a dark figure standing on the pier, awaiting her return. The puppet, the size of the man, Mendango. Her throat constricted with fear. She had worked magic on the island. Getting the tears from the statue, that was magic, right? Her protected status was finished, and Mendango had come to apprehend her. Can you drop me off someplace else? She asked. The boat moved steadily forward. What could she do? Even if they dropped her off elsewhere, Mendango would just follow. The boat was 20 yards from the pier, then 10. She had to protect the contents of her bowl, and she could not let Mendango haul her away. But how could she stop him? The paddle boat rushed up against the pier, coming to a stop alongside it. Mendango made no move to grab her. He seemed to be waiting for her to disembark. Kendra set the bowl on top of the pier and stood up, noticing that the bowl was being held steady. When she stepped onto the pier, Mendango moved forward, but as before, he could not seem to grab her. He stood with both arms half raised, fingers fluttering. Kendra picked up the bowl and walked around the lumberjack. Mendango followed her the length of the pier. Why would Muriel have sent Mendango after her if he could not seize her? Did Muriel know she had communed with the fairy queen? If so, the puppet sure moved quickly. His being there was probably precautionary. The problem it posed was severe. Evidently, Kendra had not actually worked magic on the island. She had merely collected an ingredient. But in concocting the elixir the fairy queen described and giving it to the fairies, she would certainly be performing magic. The moment her protected status ended, Mendigo would be upon her. That was not an option. Kendra set the silver bowl on the steps leading up to the gazebo. Then she turned and confronted Mendango. The puppet was more than half a head taller than her. I think you work like Hugo. You have no brain and just do what you're told. Is that right, Mendango? The lumberjack stood still. Kendra tried not to get creeped out. I have a feeling you won't obey me, but it's worth a try. Mendango, go climb a tree and sit up there forever. Mendango stood motionless. Kendra walked straight at him. He was trying to lift his arms to grab her, but was unable to carry out the intention. Standing close to him, she reached out a tentative finger and touched his wooden torso. He did not react, except to continue struggling against whatever force prevented him from seizing her. You can't touch me. I haven't done anything mean or used any magic, but I can touch you. She gently stroked both arms just beneath the shoulders. The lumberjack jittered with an effort of trying to grasp her. Want to see my second decisive move of the night? She asked. Mendango quivered, hooks jingling, but remained powerless to take hold of Kendra. Unconsciously biting her lower lip, she grabbed both arms just below the shoulders, unhooked them, and dashed away from the lumberjack. She heard the overgrown puppet chasing her. She raced to the edge of the pond and hurled the wooden arms into the water. Something clipped Kendra's shoulder and sent her spinning to the ground. A crushing force pressed against her back, pinning her down. She could hardly breathe. Craning her neck, she saw Mendango looming over her, using his foot to hold her in place. How could a creature that looked so flimsy be so strong? A bruise where he had kicked her stung deep. It would certainly bruise. Kendra reached for his other leg, hoping to unhook the shin, but the puppet danced out of reach. For a moment, Mendango appeared indecisive. Kendra prepared to roll away just in case he charged and tried to kick at her again. If she could just unhook a leg. Instead, Mendango hurried onto the pier. Both of his arms were floating in the water. One had almost drifted within reach of the pier. Mendango crouched, carefully balancing one foot and stretching out a leg to the nearest arm. Just as his toes made contact, a white hand shot out of the water and seized Mendango by the ankle, yanking him into the pond with a splash. Kendra waited, holding her breath as she watched. The lumberjack did not resurface. She dashed back to the steps and picked up the bowl. Kendra dared not run while holding the tears. Instead, she walked swiftly, carefully not to waste any of her precious cargo. She walked across the lawn, through the arch, down the path, and onto the road. Stars continued to fade in the eastern sky. Kendra hurried along the road. She was pretty sure her sheltered status was at an end. But if mischief had to be done, at least it felt worthwhile. She had a feeling it would not be her final mischievous act of the night.